Good evening, good night, good day at whatever time you may be watching this. My name is Emunah, and this is SOULONOMiCS 101. So basically, yesterday I was co-hosting a show that I usually do, and the topic was interracial marriage. I really don't usually comment on these in certain spheres, let's just say. But this was an interesting show because of the feedback from the audience, social media, and then today I wake up and I see, this conversation. It keeps coming around about the way in which we look at interracial marriages. Where is this coming from, and what does it mean? And it's funny because during the broadcast, one of the brothers said jungle fever, and I'm like, yeah, I remember the terminology, but I don't really remember the show, the movie. I was like 11 at the time, right when it first came out. Of course, that's not appropriate for a child. So I remember the terminology growing up, but I didn't remember the movie. Some 25 years later, I decide to go search down the movie and watch it. So a lot of the things, let me just say, have been planted, even though they pre-existed. They have been planted and exploited along the way in the minds of the people. The conversation and the narratives that are heard in the movie right now in 2016, 25 years later, we can pretty much go and hear the black women saying the same thing, the men saying the same thing. So here's my little breakdown of Jungle Fever if it's been that long since you've seen this movie. It was produced by Spike Lee back in 1991. All right, they say it budgeted $14 million to make this production. Okay, and grossed over $32.4 million in the box office in America. And production company was Universal Pictures and Spike Lee's 40 Acres and a Mule Film Works. And then we have the distributors and everything. They go into all of that. You can definitely see that stuff if you want to learn more about the actual production. But what I thought this was interesting because there's a lot of money behind this thought or this narrative. Remember, we learned about media, stereotypes, projections. So I just thought it interesting as we're having this conversation that we don't have it out of context of what we have been fed for quite some time. So this one is wild because there's a man who's married, which is Wesley Snipes' character. It didn't say he was unhappily married, but it alluded earlier on that he was unhappy with having oatmeal every morning. And he wished that his wife could cook something different. Another thing that I found a little bit disturbing in the beginning of the movie was the little daughter that they had, the nearly white wife or the mulatto wife that this very dark Wesley Snipes is casted with. Their daughter complains or says that she can hear her parents' intercourse, and spoke of it later on spoke of it as something that, yeah, I like to listen in. Anyway, that was a side note. I thought that was strange, but let's continue. 1991, I definitely wasn't seeing none of this stuff. But he gets, long story short, fast forward, he in his office, he's an architect, he's vying for his space in corporate America, he's vying for his space to be accepted by the European. He's pro-black, you understand? He wants to have a black secretary or a temp, and he's upset because they give him an Italian or a Euro, or in their racial terminology, a white woman. And again, now, according to him, later on in the show, he's always been curious. You know what they say about curiosity? He's always been curious, so he allows himself and his curiosity and his desires to suck him into this level of unknown. I wonder. So at which point he didn't wonder what would happen to my family, or wonder what would happen to his daughter, or wonder what would happen to his life that he has built. He wondered about the underwear. He wondered about the private parts. He wondered about his selfish desires of expressing his manhood to this secretary woman, of which he does it. She also, on the other hand, is discontent. Just bear with me, because in the movie, it's showing you what kind of propels some people to do this. Oftentimes you hear you don't love yourself, it's self-hate, it's all of these things going to mind. The girl, Angie in the show, or Angela, she's discontented with her Italian, roguish, ill-mannered family. Her mother has passed. Her brothers are roguish. It's like she's the helper for her family, and she's tired of her neighborhood. She wants to try a new flavor. And so this new flavor is dark chocolate. So for some people, it's a game. And she actually engages, even though he says, hey, you know what, I have a wife, but who cares about that? Who cares about that? Who cares about the wife? Who cares about the child? Let's do it. And then they throw all caution to the wind. And as we like to say, family is not just two individuals. Family is the families that are attached. So they're not thinking about how this is going to play out because you're trying to join two opposing forces who don't want to necessarily be together. They're not thinking about that. So they go forward doing what they want to do only to suffer the consequences. She gets kicked out, beaten by her father. Her father like bunching her up, threw her on the ground, beating her with a strap. His parents, they're ultra religious, but they're disappointed in him. And his father, the scene where his father does the breakdown on what it was like in slavery, that's a deep scene because he's dropping exactly what it was. The thought that the European, and I'm going to switch now from the movie. If you haven't seen it in a long time, it's a good one to analyze what is going on now. Before I get there, once the wife found out, of course, here comes the angry black woman scene. So they have the Angela Bassett scene before Angela Bassett does it in Waiting to Exhale, where this mulatto is angered. I guess it's her black side, right? And she's throwing all his stuff out the window and she's throwing everything and she's going ballistic because he cheated on her with this European. And everybody, he's like, oh, don't do it in the open. But the thing is, this is what you did in close quarters. He didn't want to accept the responsibility. He blamed it on his friend for opening his big mouth. He called his friend's wife a bee. He blames everyone else except for himself. This is the black man. This is Wesley Snipes' character. Now let's fast forward to today. This movie is like today, where we see this social media conversation and a lot of black men are blaming women of their nation. A lot of them are allowing their curiosity, their personal indifferences, like Wesley Snipes' character, just to be very narrow-minded and tunnel vision as to what effects this will have not only in your life but in your nation, in your community. But what I realized is that because we are broken as a nation, as a community, and we have lost a sense of the implications of our actions, we've lost a sense of building up something beyond ourselves for the most part. Oftentimes people think, what's the big deal? It's just, but for somebody, like we were saying on the show, for people or a nation of people or a tribe of people to understand that they have land to protect, to understand that they have a culture to protect, to understand that they have certain things to protect, even if you were the same color as them. Because I've seen a lot of other cultural documentary type movies and study certain things. You can be their same color, but if you are of another people, they are not really inclined to want you to marry into their culture, because this will mean that you and them will become one. And this is what we find as the problem displayed in Jungle Fever, is that when the thought is, do you want to have children? He's like, I don't want to have no cross-breed, quadroon, octoon. I don't want to have no mulatto children. Because they're going to be all confused. And the reality is, yes, you do confuse the children. Because now you just merge two opposing cultures. And if they're not accepting of one another, the child feels like, listen, I don't know where to go. So this is a very serious issue as it relates to community building, as it relates to returning back to self. The men and the women. I found it interesting that they had some women in the scene that were saying they would do it. She doesn't care. She's not discriminating because she's tired of being mistreated. So anyone who's going to be nice, anyone who's going to approach you and make you feel wanted, you're going to subscribe to them. This is what the woman was saying in the scene. Another interesting thing was all of the racist Italians who call black people all of these names, they admit to saying, you know what? If I had the opportunity, I would smash her. I wouldn't wife her. I wouldn't be caught in the street with her, but I will use her as a whore. Now, let's go back to slavery, and then I'm going to wrap it up. In slavery, it was okay to debase the black woman. And I think that psychologically within the mind of the so-called black man, this still resonates. that you were at the bottom, but the European woman, she was pristine. You understand what I'm saying? She was held on a pedestal. You, master defiled you, the overseer defiled you. You know, I couldn't even protect you. And this thing that was always locked away in the closet, you know, this woman who was untouchable, the thought that, you know, I can touch her and not be whipped. I can touch her and have something that was so dear and near to him. So you were able to be defiled. So, you know, it's like, I don't want that. That's common. Not all. This is not going across the board. This is speaking concerning the epidemic that we see in our community. The thought process that, you know what, I can't find what I'm looking for. Although you just hurdled over a whole host of women, you know, just to get some European woman, because why? She fits the narrative to say, I oftentimes may feel as a man unworthy, and having something of the oppressors makes me feel a little bit better about myself. I live in a space or a place where you see some brothers, fine, nice looking brothers, and they picked some of the, and it's not to be racist or anything, but you have to be like, wow, really? You wanted the master's possession that much that's in the movie. Samuel Jackson's character says, she got money? Oh, she got to have money, because, you know, if you're going to go for a white girl, she at least got to have some money. There is a further thing that's happening in the mind. And just think about it. It's jungle fever. A fever is an illness. It's a sickness. It's an infection that means that you're not operating at your full capacity. You understand what I'm saying? You're in a fervor. He said, I was curious, and at the end of the day, after you traumatized your family and everything fell apart, now you want to go back. So we need to really take a look at this. Sometimes it takes for communication, an open forum, to hear the grievances. A lot of times there's issues with your mother. Black men have issues with their mother. So therefore they don't want anybody that looks like their mother, their sister, their aunt, or anybody who resembles that. Sometimes, again, like you say, he feels powerless. And so this status symbol of possessing that which belongs unto the oppressor is one that gives his ego a boost. I mean, what boost do you have if you are at the bottom rung of society walking around with someone who looks like you? Who in your mind or in the recesses of your epigenetic makeup, you remember that this person was debased in your sight and you could do nothing about it. It's not that much of a boost to the self-esteem. But shout out to all the brothers who know the value of the black woman, or the so-called black woman, and understand that she has been through and continues to go through, such as yourself, a lot. The statistics show that it is more likely for the man to go and get someone of another race than the woman. And now that the women are doing it, now the men are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, you're not supposed to do that. You can't go out and be with this person or that person. But they have been doing it all the time. I have one more thing. I said I was done, right? But one more thing to show you how long this goes back to. It's a boxer. His name was Jack Johnson. I don't know if you know about Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson, or John Arthur Jack Johnson, was born in March of 1878. His nickname was the Galveston Giant. Okay? He was a boxer, heavyweight boxing champion from 1908 to 1915. He was like the Mike Tyson before Mike Tyson, understand? He got into so he was going around doing it in. Remember, this is the 1800s. This is not long after slavery is abolished. His parents actually, if I'm not mistaken, were born in slavery. You can look him up, Jack Johnson. So his parents were born in slavery. He's born free. But he'd have grown up during segregation. He said, although Jack grew up in the South, he said that segregation was not an issue in the somewhat secluded city of Galveston, as everyone living in Galveston, 12th Ward, was poor and went through the same struggles. And he remembers growing up with a gang of white boys in which he never felt victimized or excluded. So he's in this area where there are Europeans as well as quote unquote black people who are depressed. So he's not seeing that color line or that boundary. I'm just going to go fast forward to Jack as he is going through the country and doing his thing boxing wise. Let me just jump down to a space and time where it was not cool for so-called black men to interracially date. When you go down to his private life, Jack had jungle fever. Jack was down with the swirl. It says here, Johnson was married 3 times. All of his wives were white, a fact that caused considerable controversy at the time. They wasn't really feeling this in the early 1900s, Jack. You understand what I'm saying? That you were running around with these lily white European women that just, and he wasn't that far. So this is 1900, just like 50 years before, would have been a real serious problem. And at this time, it still is a problem. It says in January of 1911, Johnson married Etta Terry Duryea, a Brooklyn socialite and a former wife of Clarence Duryea. She met Johnson at a car race in 1909. The romantic involvement was very turbulent. Suffering from severe depression, she, the European woman, committed suicide in September 1912, shooting herself with a revolver. So she apparently had some thoughts and feelings in her mind, and that, yeah, this big, strong buck, let me get with him. Less than 3 months later, on December the 4th, 1912, Johnson married. So the woman commits suicide, and less than 3 months later, he goes to marry another one. Johnson married Lucille Cameron. After Johnson married Cameron, 2 ministers in the South recommended that Johnson be lynched. Cameron divorced him in 1924 because of infidelity. So it's like, I can get these euros, but I'm not going to be faithful to them. I always just wanted this prized possession. I got it, on to other things. It says the next year. So he gets the first one. She couldn't take it anymore. She shoots herself, commits suicide. 3 months later, he gets the next one. And then she divorces him. It says the next year after she divorced him in 1924, Johnson married Irene Pennyway. When asked by a reporter at Johnson's funeral what she loved about him, she replied, "I loved him because of his courage. He faced the world unafraid. There wasn't anybody or anything he feared. Johnson had no children." It's not a new thought to say when you get money or you get status as a black man, you go look for a European. This was, what? This is 1912. So over 100 years ago, one of your foreparents, straight out of slavery, did the same thing. So there's some fever, all right, that's going on in the mind that, definitely really needs to be taken a look at, because it's a level of, it may be somebody saying, I don't have anything to say about somebody on their personal level, but I think it is short-sighted for us not to look long-term and the implications of what it means long-term. So until next time, I have another movie in mind. So this one was Jungle Fever, so check that out. I have another movie in mind that actually switches the roles, and it's an Italian man trying to get with, and I remember seeing it a long time ago. I just have to search it to see if I missed some stuff when I was younger, and it's really coming out in the wash right about now. So until next time, my name is Emunah Yisrael. 1.